When it comes to Star Wars, there are many designs of capital ship to choose from when you are asked to pick a favorite. But one ship, which you may or may not have heard of depending on your level of involvement in Star Wars and time you have spent in the fandom, is above and away my favorite. I'm going to explain myself because you've probably seen the picture of it. Basically, this video is me saying I like a mediocre Star Wars ship and then a lot of justification for why. Stay tuned for that. First, let's just establish what a capital ship is in my mind in the Star Wars universe. As I see it, a capital ship is any vessel capable of engaging the largest units of an opposing fleet on a peer level, forming a useful part of the battle line, being able to both deliver and sustain hits, and remain effective for some time. With this definition in mind, ships such as the Arquitens, Nebulon series of frigates, corvettes, and smaller vessels, merchant ships, and starfighters are not counted, with ships classed as heavy cruiser being considered the smallest units fitting into the capital ship category. I also tend to put superclass ships like the Executor, Mandator line, and Supremacy classes into their own categories for reasons I would not get into, here at least. This, though, still provides us with a huge variety of options to choose from, with everything from the Imperial class of Star Destroyers used by the Imperial Navy to the biggest vessels in the navies of the Rebel Alliance, Galactic Republic, Confederacy of Independent Systems, New Republic, Imperial Remnant, First Order, Mandalorian clans, Hutt cartels, Hapen Confederacy, Hapes Consortium, Empire of Zim the Despot, and dozens of other factions up for grabs. So, with all of these excellent ships to choose from, which one is my favorite? So if you've seen the video thumbnail, then you will undoubtedly know that the Dreadnought class heavy cruiser is my favorite Star Wars capital ship. And you have doubtlessly been wondering when I would stop all the introductory junk and defend my choice. If you've instead been watching the video wondering what in the world the ship is in the thumbnail, then let me enlighten you, and first say it's not just the Battlestar Galactica lacking her little fighter carrier pods. The Dreadnought is a ship from Legends continuity, basically Star Wars before Disney bought it. This ship was introduced late in the Old Republic era, but some years prior to the Clone Wars. The ship was smaller and less capable than the later Star Destroyers, but was very common throughout the galaxy due to a mixture of clever marketing by their builder, general galactic turmoil encouraging naval expansion, and generous licensing agreements allowing even small planetary navies to afford one if they really wanted. This meant that even after the death of the Emperor over Endor, the Dreadnought was a very common sight throughout the galaxy, being used by pretty much everyone on every side of any conflict you would choose to mention. They were everywhere. Well, you're probably wondering something along the lines of, why did I pick the Dreadnought when other way more iconic designs are up for grabs? Is it super powerful, maybe? No. Is it really fast or well armored? No. Was it really big? Again, no. In fact, when it comes to most things, the Dreadnought was either bog standard or subpar. The ship's armament was alright for most of its service life. Her armor and shielding were sturdy, but nothing to write home about, and her speed was sluggish? Overall, the class was very meh when compared to the capital ships of later eras. So why do I like the design then? Well, I like the Dreadnought specifically because it's not the greatest and most bestest battleship to ever be commissioned. The Dreadnought was at one point among the most powerful warships in the galaxy, but that period was a long time ago by the original trilogy. Technology had moved on, but this ship endured because it was well-designed, well-built, sturdy, and easy to upgrade and modify in basically any yard that you could find. Unfortunately, in Star Wars, most of the ships you see most often are the biggest, bestest, most powerful, and greatest warships ever made. Authors, game developers, comic book illustrators, and filmmakers love to make the ships in their stories the best, as a means of upping the stakes and presenting a challenge for their heroes that they have never before encountered. This constant power creep can make the universe feel very tired after a while, And when every ship in the universe is the best and most powerful, it makes all of the ships rather bland and boring. But the Dreadnought goes against this trend by being average. Good enough for most situations, but hardly ever the greatest and most powerful ship in the area. And that good enough is kind of an important point. Not everyone has a proper capital ship. If you show up with a Dreadnought and your enemy only has some corvettes, then you win because you have a heavy cruiser and they have a couple of corvettes. At the same time, it doesn't really make too much sense for Han and Luke and Chewie and the gang to be constantly going up against the most powerful warship known to the galaxy in all of its history in the Millennium Falcon, because realistically, a Corvette versus the Millennium Falcon more than overmatches it, so why should they go up against the greatest, most powerful one? It's one of those, if you bring a gun to a knife fight, you win because you have a gun. Don't cancel the video or censor the video, YouTube. This is a hypothetical, not life advice. The ship also makes the universe seem much more lived in. By having a ship which is meh now, but used to be very good and is still useful, it shows that technology is advancing, but in a fairly linear pattern, and that ships are not made obsolete the instant a new vessel enters service, as is often presented in a lot of media. Not just Star Trek or Star Wars. Star Trek does it constantly, most sci-fi franchises do it as well to various levels, and it just kind of gets old after a while. Basically, the Dreadnought is good enough for most situations, easy to repair and refit, plentiful throughout the galaxy, and makes the universe seem more lived in by having these older ships still around and still viable. The ship also looks like the Battlestar Galactica a bit to me, which just makes me like her more because Galactica is just such a cool design. Also, Galactica started off as a Star Wars ripoff in the 70s. Star Wars was 77, but Galactica was like 78, so they were really on their toes. And I kind of love the out-of-universe that the people who illustrated the original Thrawn trilogy kind of made a Battlestar Galactica-looking ship because they liked the Galactica, and then included it in Star Wars media, so the franchise, well known as being influenced heavily by Star Wars, in fact influenced a Star Wars ship. It makes things much more interesting. I don't know if that's necessarily been confirmed anywhere, but it just kind of makes sense to me, looking at the two and the timing. It makes me laugh. So that's another sort of in or out of universe reason for liking the Dreadnought, that it looks like a rip-off of a ship that is a rip-off of a Star Wars ship, but from a different franchise that coincidentally was meant to rip off Star Wars and make some money off of the success of Star Wars for a different studio. Inspiration and copycatting are very, very closely related, as it turns out. That's what I'm going to leave you with. Hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to list your favorite Star Wars ship below. Well, Star Wars capital ship. List your favorite Star Wars ship if you want, but mainly Star Wars capital ship. If you feel like it, you can support the channel on Patreon. There's a link down below. Should be, if I'm doing my job right. And yeah, that's just about it, really, for this video. It started out as a fairly simple concept and has since, as things tend to do, drawn on for quite some time. But hopefully we're past that point and we're going to end. Oh, look, the stop button.